All right. Well, greetings. Bom dia, balalitima, como está? How are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you very much. So, yeah, pleasure to be speaking with you, and I'm so honored and glad that you agreed for this sit down and this discussion, and that's what I wanted to be, not an interview or interrogation or prep for your dissertation, but just kind of organic discussion. So, yeah, I was really interested in your research and more so interested recently just because I have become kind of interested in what was going on in the country um, presently as it relates to kind of what's going on between the different factions of the military. So I remember in your research you had spoken with veterans, and how they participated in the war for independence. So just kind of understanding some of that history, I think is helpful to what's going on presently. And so, yeah, I thought this would be a great time to just sit down and have a discussion with you and dive into a little bit of your research and what got you interested in this particular research topic, as well as what got you interested in researching Guinea-Bissau, in general. So with that, I'll just open it up and turn it over to you, and you just give us a brief introduction and share whatever you'd like to share with us as it pertains to introducing yourself and familiarizing us with you and this topic.
Well, I want to say thank you for this interview.
Yeah.
Anytime I get a chance to talk about, my trip to Guinea-Bissau, I'm like all over.
Okay.
But yeah, my name is Jarenda Williams, and I am a Carolina girl, a North Carolina girl. And since I'm a daughter of a veteran, Air Force veteran, so I guess this is part of what brings me, to the topic of researching women veterans that participated in the struggle for liberation in Guinea-Bissau. And from a young age, I was I was given the gift of mediumship. So I always knew that there was a whole world that was unseen,
Mhm.
and that the ancestors were playing an integral part in, what is happening with us, and in the fact of like through us as individuals.
Right.
Uh, and so as I got older, I went to college and I really wanted to do business marketing, but I got into a space where, history was very much important to me. And I began learning about African history. I love European history, but connecting to African history was like so very personal for me,
Yeah.
especially like reading colonial history with how they, um, you know, took our history and made what they wanted and said what they wanted. And so it has always been my mission to find out the facts, what
Right.
really happened, so that we can celebrate who we are and celebrate our ancestors because our ancestors want to be known. So maybe about 2000, it was 2009, I won a DNA test from African ancestry.
You won a DNA test.
Yes, they
Right.
had
Tell us
back
about that.
then they had during February, during Black History Month,
Yeah.
they had a contest every day of February, someone would win.
Okay.
And I think I won like toward the end, like February 24th or something like
Yeah.
that. But I was doing it every day,
Okay.
And I won the matrilineal DNA test to find out my mother's 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 line.
Ooh.
And
Yeah.
this was important for me because growing up as, as a kid, these are the energies that were around me.
Right.
I never knew my grandmother or my great grandmother, but they were always there.
Mm.
And so to get the DNA test um, and find out that, I am Mendinka from Senegal, Mende from Sierra Leone, and then the Guinea-Bissau Fulani the Balanta Guinea Fulani from Guinea-Bissau, like really
Right.
Um, like,
Right, right, right.
that whole mix, right there. So that
Right.
was very eye-opening for me because this was really my first time learning about the Balanta people
Okay.
and learning about Guinea-Bissau.
Right.
And later I found out my dad is Yoruba and Tikar
Okay.
as well. And so, I'm in graduate school at this time. So I'm really trying to pick a topic for my dissertation. What am I going to study? What am I going to research? That sort of thing. So I'm all over the place.
Right.
And I really wanted to get into studying the history and memory of the slave trade, among the Balanta people.
Yeah. So let me let
But
me let me let me interrupt you real quick.
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
just touch on that learning, your lineage had, and you saying that these women were around you. You never met them, but they were around you. Was there a and I know you said you didn't know much about the Belanta, but was there like a this makes sense moment, or was there any type of connection, or something that you felt that you had a tie to these people or this area of Africa, West Africa? Was there like a click, like, yeah, okay, I kind of knew it, or was it totally like, wow, I had no idea? Which one was it more for you?
It was all encompassing
Okay.
actually. When I was younger, maybe about 13, I renamed myself.
Okay.
And I named myself uh, Jarenda Fulani. That's what I
Wow.
named myself.
Okay.
So, so
Man.
that's what.
Wow. Wow.
So when the
Wow.
DNA test came back, oh, you're Fulani, it was like,
Right. Okay.
and, but I
Yeah.
had a few spiritual experiences where the ancestors came to me, and I'm going to tell you that prior to getting the DNA results, um, the dots were connected.
Okay.
Because in many of these spiritual experiences, I was getting like visuals,
Mm.
and I was able to interact. I couldn't understand my ancestors, my
Right.
more older ancestors, but I was able to interact with them. And when I talked to Ingadesa, to Chokman, so many years ago, before he passed away,
Wow.
Ibaye, um, he connected me to Mario Cisse.
Mhm.
And one of the things Mario did when we first connected was he would send me pictures of his family.
Mm.
And one of the pictures that he sent me of his brother in traditional wear was the same um, uh, um, clothing that my ancestor appeared to me in.
Wow. Okay.
So it, it was one of those, surreal, um, experiences,
Yeah.
to see what I was seeing spiritually and then it manifests physically,
Okay. Okay.
And so I mean there were many, many instances like that to show, I was had this connection to the Balanta and the Fulani people of Guinea-Bissau.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was like
Right. 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 Right.
yeah, yeah.
But funny side note, you just said, I just thought about something you said that, and this is random, not necessarily related, but said Mario's brother the attire reminded you. Mario is I have a cousin, right? And he's he's like a doppelganger for Mario. They look just like they look almost just alike, right? I don't even think I've ever told Mario that. But I got another cousin, man, and like I remember one time I was on a Zoom call with Mario, and my daughter walked by and she thought, because we call him Chocolate, that's his nickname, and she was like, "Oh, that's like that dude looks like chocolate." Like, I'm like, "No, that ain't. That's Mario." But
Mhm.
but anyway, yeah, just a random note. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you with that.
Oh no, that's so but it's amazing, how this DNA just carries,
Right, exactly.
and so but yeah, I yeah, so once I was able to make that connection, with the ancestors, and I'm looking for research, topics and things of that nature, I decided to go with women who participated in the struggle for liberation in Guinea-Bissau.
Okay.
And I'm gonna be totally honest, that was because like during the research and the reading and everything, I fell in love with Amilcar Cabral. Like I fell in love with
Yeah.
his philosophy. I
Right.
fell in
Right.
love with
Right.
how he led this country to independence. Um, just in how he saw women and what his vision for Guinea-Bissau was.
Mhm.
Um, that was, what was like the moving factor here.
Yeah.
And so my
Mhm.
research doesn't focus on Amilcar Cabral, but it focused on the women who followed his vision. And that was very clear in, this research is that every one of these women that I interviewed, um, brought up Amilcar Cabral, a memory, what he said,
Mhm.
verbatim to them,
Mhm.
and so that was, very, very exciting, to be able to be and engaging in his
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So how difficult was it? Like, did you have any other potential research topics? How difficult or how easy was it to decide upon this specific topic? Like, were there any second runner-ups or anything else that you had an interest in that you wanted to pursue, or was this like your vision from the very beginning?
okay, so this was hard.
Mhm.
This was hard because my second runner up was studying the history and memory of the Balanta people, of the Atlantic slave trade.
Mhm.
I wanted to go in and talk to elders about, what was being, what is that narrative? What was being told about those of us that were taken off into the slave trade and moved across the ocean? Did they miss us? Do they remember that it happened? Do they care?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. And that was something that really pressed on me because I have this Alex Haley type of story going on, but I would like to call it that, where I'm connecting with this woman, this mini greats grandmother that, was taken off into the slave trade.
Right. Right.
And so I'm trying to find her and reconnect with her. So that topic was very, it was drumming at me like
Yeah.
you got to do this, you got to
Right.
do this. And so I decided that I would talk to the women veterans because they're passing away.
Yes.
They're getting older. Carmen Pereira passed away a few years ago, that sort of thing. Um, and, with the ancestors, I felt like, this memory of the Balanta that I would be able to, take my journey as I did when I went to Guinea-Bissau. I got to talk to an Asika to ask him about, this woman that was taken off into a slave trade. And Asika is the Balanta medicine man.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Explain that
and
for, I know, but there's some people who may not.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, in traditional societies, you have someone that is there as, a medicine person, a medicine man or woman, someone that can see that's a seer, that's very intuitive,
Mm.
and they help people in the community, more or less. I am so sorry.
Yeah.
My computer keeps dinging. Um, but yeah, so in the Balanta culture, they're called the Asika. And
Right.
so I got an opportunity on my next to last day in Guinea-Bissau to go and ask this Asika who had great energy. He was fantastic
Mhm.
about my mini great grandmother.
Mm.
So
Is that something you
yeah.
want to hold? You want to you feel comfortable sharing, or do you want is that kind of personal information, just the information that the NC shared to with you?
Oh, okay. Some of it I'm gonna hold on to for a later time
Okay.
because I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
But what I can share is um the Asika gave me some information about my mini greats grandmother that had already came to me. What came to me was her name or a name. And the Asika gave me the same name that came to me maybe about 4 years prior to.
Wow.
So that was um, a confirmation that I was on the right track, that
Right.
sort of thing. He couldn't see everything about my past. He gave me some good nuggets about, my family and how they converted to Islam. So they were, a Balanta Fulani mix. Um, and so he was able to tell me what region he thought they came from and who I needed to go see next.
Wow. Okay.
So
Wow.
that's exciting because now I have to go back to Guinea-Bissau
Right.
so
Right.
that I can
Right.
talk to this seer, to see, if this seer would have more of a connection with my family and what she would
Yeah.
have to say.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So kind of given that that understanding about who your mini great grandmother was, and what her what her spiritual kind of path was, and potentially where she came from. Did that having that information, did that cause you um to kind of look at your journey any differently? Was it just a confirmation of that what you were doing was right, or okay, now I need to kind of shift focus from what I was looking at to this, more specifically, based on this information that I just received?
Hmm. Well, it was a confirmation,
Okay.
and yes, it was a shift.
Okay.
it,
Okay.
it definitely was a shift, because I know that once I finish this project, working on the women who participated in the struggle, these veterans, I know that now, the time I have a time clock, on my
Yeah.
ancestors as well, and understanding what the Balanta people understand about the slave trade. So the second is the first,
Okay.
after my dissertation is
Gotcha.
completed.
No, no, I completely
Yeah.
understand. I completely understand. So let's get back a little bit into your research. Um, so I don't know if you told the people. So you attend graduate school, or you did your graduate research through Howard University, correct?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay. All right. So you did your
Yeah.
undergrad at um
North, North
North
Carolina
Carolina,
Central.
yeah, North Carolina Central, and then
Hmm.
graduate work at Howard. Okay. All right. And
Mhm.
so once you decided, this is the topic that I'm going to research, how difficult was it to plan, and prepare to get into, the actual conducting the research, right? In terms of preparation for travel, what you wanted to accomplish once you arrived in Guinea-Bissau, and then some of the perhaps the challenges in terms maybe logistical challenges, challenges with language. How did you overcome those things? And then capturing the research, documenting. Could you give us just kind of run us down that path, of how you went about handling those things?
Wow. That's a journey. That's
Yeah.
a journey. I got my master's at Howard in 2007, and I took a little break to teach for a little while. And 2009, I told you about, what was happening. And I went to Howard. I started at 2000 and started in 2011. So I had these two topics I had was battling with, but it's 2023, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's a
Yeah. A lot
gap
happened, right? Yeah.
there.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yes.
so
Yeah.
so I was actually having babies
Okay.
in that time frame. So,
Right.
the whole time, since 2011, I've had three daughters. So,
Wonderful. Wonderful.
at every yeah, so I was trying to, you know, travel and go and learn languages, and it wasn't happening.
Right.
So my youngest now is 6.
Okay.
So it gave me the opportunity to plan. I mean, because I had the family logistical thing, who was going to take care of my kids while I was gone.
Yeah.
That was first and foremost. And then after that, I had, Mario helping me. So that was so helpful. My advisor, Jean Michael Botali, he's he was fantastic. He's from Africa, so he's like, this is what you need to make sure you need to do, in order to travel. So the my advisor was fantastic in it all. Um, there are a lot of things, institutional review board type of things. I had people helping me with that, you know. As far as booking the flights and all of that, I had help with that. Like, so every step of the way, people, belong to people that had tested belong to DNA were helping me. People that had already been to Guinea-Bissau was helping. They were helping me. Um, Language. So I studied a little bit of Balanta, but once I realized that my interviews were not going to be in Balanta, my
Mhm.
interview were going to be in like Guinea-Bissau Creole. I switched, um, and even there, I had help with the translations. Mario was my translator while I was there, and I learned how to read Portuguese.
Mhm.
That was the main thing that took the most time was learning how to read Portuguese so that I
Yeah.
could go into the archives and read newspapers and Portuguese official documents, that sort of thing. My speaking isn't well.
Okay.
um, but the reading,
You can
I can
read.
definitely
Yeah.
read Portuguese.
Okay.
Um, so that was probably the most difficult part for me, was because my second language is technically German.
Mm.
So to move into
Wow.
Portuguese,
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
a little
So where
difficult.
did that come in? Like, how did you, was that like you started learning German in high school, or you did that as an undergraduate, or did you live in Germany as like military brat traveling? Is that
Well, I was actually born in Germany.
okay? Okay.
Um, so I don't remember it. We were only there for, well, I was only there for maybe a year or so before my parents came back to the States. But I had a connection to Germany. I've always been fascinated by the German people. And when I got older into college, I started learning German and I became interested in German film, Afro German film, understanding how African people or Afro Germans are portrayed in film in
Mm.
Germany. I went to Germany and I studied for, 6 months in the beautiful town of Heidelberg, and or the beautiful city. And yeah, so that's where that came from.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, and just so everyone knows, I think we talked about this, but you're studying, or your PhD is not, it's not through like Africana studies. It's a history, it's through the history department at Howard University, correct? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's a history degree. And so that's mainly what I did a little bit of ethnography in this dissertation.
Mhm.
But it's an oral history. Just going in and talking to these women, and I talked to male veterans as well about women and about their experiences with working with women.
Okay.
Um, I had one male that did not directly work with women,
Mm.
but he was able to give me some very good some good information. And when I say working with women, I'm also asking about, relationships.
Oh
I'm
wow.
asking
Okay.
about,
Yeah. That,
love and
yeah, yeah.
courting
That
and all of
dynamic
these.
is important, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
No, I can
yeah,
imagine. Yeah.
yeah. And
Okay.
so I also asked about fathers, because these women, that's a dynamic that, I don't know if people tend to remember, is that, many of these women that were joining the war were, young.
Right.
And their fathers, in many cases, and their mothers, they did not agree with them going off and joining the war.
Mm.
So that was a whole dynamic there when we talk about gender dynamics and gender roles and that sort of thing. In many instances, it was parents being parents, to young people.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So let me ask you to talk a little bit about, the reception you received. So how receptive and willing and interested in telling these stories were the women that you interviewed? Were they excited? Were they happy that someone was interested in their stories? Was this like the first time that they had kind of had to recount and retell, what had occurred? Was there any like post-traumatic stress when recalling these stories? What was that whole process like?
It was very, very emotional.
Okay.
Um, Very emotional, and I say that to say, um, I read about these women, I mean, just in general, and I got an opportunity to interview some of the heroines of the nation,
Okay. Yeah.
and to be in the space with these women who are larger than life.
Hmm.
For me, it was an emotional thing.
Okay.
The women that I interviewed, a lot of them to re- to recount what happened were emotional. They were emotional, one, because I was there,
Yeah.
coming from this other country across the water to ask them about their experience fighting in this war.
Right.
Um, that was emotional. And many of the women, expressed thanks to me for it, just even coming and sitting and listening to them.
Yeah.
Um, and there were, I mean, all of the women wanted to tell their story.
Hmm.
They all wanted to um, add something. Um, and at the same time, the sadness was there
Hmm.
because they lost family members, they lost friends, sisters, brothers, cousins, um, sometimes in front of them. Um, so, I mean, the stress was there when they recounted these things, but the fact that they pushed through because they wanted to be heard um, was something that was very emotional and touching. And I cried in a few of these interviews.
Mm.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we laughed, we cried. Um, Sometimes I cried uncontrollably.
Right. Right.
That's not
Right.
good as an interviewer, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it was that part of myself as a Balanta Fulani woman that is proud of Guinea-Bissau
Right.
and proud of, what these women did, what they contributed to the struggle for
Mm.
independence. Um, yeah, one woman told her father, she said, um, if I die for my country.
Right. Right. Wow. So yeah, that was immediately kind of what I was thinking as you were recalling that. Just because like myself, so I'm a veteran and I've served overseas and fought and been involved in
Mhm.
kind of that. But there's a huge difference between I know myself personally and probably most African Americans who join our military and are called into that role versus someone who was fighting for their actual independence, right? You fighting for your right to be free and your country and your family and people who are like you, the ability for them to govern themselves. Fighting for actual freedom is hugely different than fighting because you decided to enlist or join and this is what you are this is part of that, you know what I'm saying, responsibility, not necessarily that you are committed to this cause, or that the the end result will result in something different for you, you know, as someone.
Mm.
So the fight is different, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then the desire, you know, the willingness to sacrifice everything because you are dedicated and you believe in this cause, and ultimately, if you prevail, you know, there'll be a benefit to your people. So, yeah, that's an entirely different kind of dynamic than what probably many of us who served in the U.S. military, you know, have experienced. So, no, that is that's a great kind of find, and you know, something, you know, that I'm glad you were able to capture and share that with us. Um, yeah, so I had another point. No, so my second point, I just thought about it, was, you know, kind of fast forward, you know, until after, you know, the war. How were these women treated after their service, after the war, today, now, you know, as veterans of, you know, the military, and veterans of this particular war, you know, were they received as kind of heroes? Were they, um, you know, were they afforded any type of, you know, special, you know, pensions, or military benefits, or veterans benefits, in any housing, anything, because of their service, you know, to the nation?
Okay. So I realized while you were asking this question, um, I haven't painted a clear picture of what these women did.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm going to circle back around to
Yeah.
that
Okay.
and then answer your question.
Gotcha.
So on during the struggle for liberation, you have women that are, you know, grown women, teenagers, and you even have girls, young girls that are being taken off into the war. And I say taken off into the war, meaning they um it was a vision of Emil Cabral in the PJIC to have um an educated nation, to have a nation that was able to self-sustain itself. And so what happened was you have a group of people, young people, even adults, that participated to get education. The
Mm,
schools were established. Initially, men taught in the schools.
mm,
And as women more and more became educated, women became educators. Not to say at the beginning of the war, there were some women who were educated. That is how they were able to get their roles in government, and how they were able to help, you know, lay those foundations and blueprints for the nation. So you have, you know, women that were teachers, women that, you know, worked in finance. You had women that were surgeons,
mm.
nurses,
Wow. Okay.
women that were transporters, and they were commanders. They were in charge of other women. I talked to two women who were in charge of 80 women, you know.
Mm,
You had women that were, um, I mean, just in every facet of what you could think. Um, Theodora Gomez knew Russian, so she was helping the men with operating the heavy artillery that were getting imported from Russia. You
mm.
know, there were people that were being sent to Cuba to learn how to do cinema, you know, like
Wow.
in every aspect, you know,
Warfare, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, people, they were sending children abroad to learn different aspects of engineering and agriculture and that sort of thing. And so women were not excluded from these things.
Mhm.
They were included, as many as Emil Cabral could get on the plane, you
Mm.
know. So you have women fighting on the front lines. My goodness. But it's busy over here today. But you women fighting on the front lines,
Yeah.
burying bodies of their friends and their comrades,
Right.
so they gave up everything to fight for Guinea-Bissau, to fight for their, brothers and their sisters and fathers and everything. So you have people that, didn't go home for a long time, for
Mhm.
years. You have people that lived in their village, because most military bases had a village that they were adjunct to,
Mhm.
adjacent to.
Yeah.
And so, so they're trying to protect the people that they grew up with and they loved, So these women were seeing their villages being bombed,
Mm.
people being relocated and moved from one place to another. They, I, I interviewed women who were young girls that were separated from their mothers
Mhm.
during the war. They were separated from their brothers and their sisters, young kids, but wherever they would go, there were always other women there to take care of them
Okay.
and love them like their own children. So this war was a very long war,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So the sacrifice was great for the promise of a nation where they would be free and to govern themselves. So that brings us to after the war. You see, there's government housing that was created in Bissau, and that's where I did the majority of the interviews with these women. I can tell you that women, are respected for what they did.
Mhm.
It's acknowledged that they participated,
Mhm.
but being a veteran of Guinea-Bissau is not luxurious by any means. And many of these women are struggling.
Mhm.
They are not, their pensions that they're getting paid are next to nothing.
Mhm.
Um, I talked to women that lived in other parts of the country. Like I said, I mainly interviewed in Bissau. The women that lived in other parts of the country were trying to get to Bissau so they can get housing. So
Okay.
outside of the capital city of Bissau, there's nowhere else in the country that offers housing.
Right.
Um, it was a very sad experience because many of them talked about how the dream wasn't realized for them,
Mhm.
and that you would think veterans would be taken care of in all countries,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
that's not the case. And yeah, they are very much struggling in many cases.
Mhm. So in the immediate aftermath of the war, for most of these women, what did they do? Did any of them go into like some of these professional careers like Cabral had envisioned? Did most of them, or did many of them, return to the respective villages and just carry on kind of domestic roles in those villages, or was it a split? What were some of the kind of paths that some of the women you spoke with took after the war?
So I spoke with women that after the war did an array of things. You had women that acquired their skills, so they continue to work in the cities, um, using them, as surgeons. There were some that, worked for the UN, and still worked in government, that sort of thing. There were women that moved back to their villages. Some didn't leave, their villages. So, and they got married and they had children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and just I mean continued, like you said, in their communities, like in a domestic capacity. So that is very much, yeah, exactly what happened
Mm, okay,
there.
okay, okay. Yeah, if you could have, your perfect kind of, or if you could have any influence with, the government or some of the ministries who govern veteran affairs, what would you think would be kind of like the ideal situation for not only women but people who served in the war and people who served in the military? Kind of what would you recommend, just based on your experiences and some of the things that you've identified as challenges, would be helpful to make their lives better?
Mm. In this situation, it would be what their voices have asked for,
Yeah,
what they have voiced to me. They want to get paid,
yeah,
a living wage, um, because they're not.
okay,
Uh, they want to be paid a living wage. They want their accommodations, their housing updated.
hmm,
Um, because many instances they don't have the maintenance to keep the property, the veteran housing together.
right,
So, that's what they want, a nice, safe space to live and have the money. Um, you know, these are older women, so they're
yeah,
still working.
right,
They're
wow,
still going
yeah,
into the markets.
yes,
They're still trying to generate income when they have fought for their country.
yeah.
Just to live, to eat.
Yeah, so most of these women probably, I guess the war was, in the early 70s. So these women would be, in their early 70s, late 60s age range. Is that
Yes,
pretty accurate?
yes.
Yeah,
I got the pleasure of interviewing a woman that was a little older,
yeah.
in her 80s. She was
Wow,
fantastic.
wow, wow, wow.
I'm checking her ID, like, is this your age?
Is this really,
Because
yeah,
yeah, because then black don't crack,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, it was yeah.
Another
Um,
interesting kind of side note is whenever I travel to Guinea-Bissau, and it could just be my experience, but um, I noticed that you see young people and you see elders. You really don't
mhm,
see, I guess I'm a middle-aged person. You really don't see people in there like from 35 to that 50, age range, right? That was just been my experience. I'm like, where are the kind of middle-aged people in Guinea-Bissau? I see young, vibrant kind of teenagers and very young adults, but middle-aged people, I just outside of maybe like working in the government and places like that,
mhm,
you didn't
mhm,
you didn't see many. And what I kind of gathered was, that the average, I think, life expectancy in Guinea-Bissau was 47 years old. So
mhm,
if you make it past that, you have that population of elders. But
mhm,
right around there is when, typically most people transition, in their later
mhm.
middle, the later 40s. So um I don't know if you noticed that, or if that was kind of what you saw when you travel there, or among, with the people that you meet and talk to, or was that just kind of my observation and maybe just unique to my experience?
I don't know that, I noticed that.
Okay.
Um, but what I did find very interesting, when we were discussing the war and discussing rituals and things of that nature, um, they, I basically asked them a question about, performing rituals. Was that something that they did on an individual level, or, did they participate in like communal rituals for protection, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
during the war? And one of the interesting things that they brought up was, when you would go petition, the ancestors or what have you, many people didn't, they would initially go and say, well, if you keep me alive after the war, I'll bring you, whatever kind of offering,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
Right.
And in many instances, well, in some instances, as they say, people didn't fulfill those promises.
Mm-hmm.
So after the war, what was told to me from numerous people was that people just started passing away. Even though the war was over, um, they didn't, fulfill
Yeah.
those ritual
Promises. Yeah.
obligations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the women that I talked to, they were like, I did mine, you know.
Right. Right. That's what I'm talking to you now. Yeah.
I did mine. So
Right.
that was one of the things that, was occurring,
Yeah.
for me, as far as, people, passing. But yes, I mean, the life expectancy isn't that high there.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to kind of think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that brings me to another question you just brought up to me. So, what did you primarily, you just interview women kind of irrespective of their like tribal, where they came from, whether they would belong to Fula, Fulani, or Manjaco. Did they, what I'm trying to get after is the different um tribes, like say belong to, did their tribal and ethnic kind of affiliation, did it impact their role in the military at all? Did Balanta only fight with Balanta? Did they have any special rituals that Balanta women did that other women who weren't Balanta did? Did that, the different ethnicities, fighting, was that prevalent, or was that did that impact kind of operations or anything that went on during the war?
That's a very interesting question. Because from, okay, so this is kind of like a layered question with
Yes.
layered answers.
Right,
Uh,
right, right. It is
so,
layered. Yeah. Because
so
it's a
I,
follow-on question, right? So,
yeah,
yeah,
so I mean, basically, all right. So you have the PAIGC and the Amilcar Cabral
right,
basically bringing everyone under one banner.
right, right.
Saying that we are all one,
Yeah,
that sort of thing, and there's no separation. And so within that, they refer to each other as camaradas.
mm,
And so you have that dynamic that's playing on top, right?
right,
And so then you have, um, the their ethnicity, going on. So
yeah,
yes, I interviewed women. It didn't matter, as long as they were veterans and they were registered veterans. That's who I interviewed.
right, right,
And in talking to these women, when it came to like the ritual spaces and things of that nature, I can say that when it came to communal rituals, they came together as women,
okay, mm,
irrespective of ethnicity,
yeah,
because in certain instances, and I'm gonna say in certain instances, it was about using spiritual knowledge and intelligence to move the Portuguese away from them.
mm,
So that required them as women to be able to do
right,
together.
right, okay,
Individually, depending on ethnicity, I could see where, some women would say, oh, I didn't participate, I didn't do any rituals, that's not my thing. But at the same time, some of these women joined as small children.
mm-hmm,
So that whole cultural component of doing rituals as an individual wasn't anything that was embedded in them,
mm-hmm,
yet it wasn't anything that they did prior
right,
to, joining the war.
mm-hmm,
So as they grew up, they didn't, participate.
right,
The I had a strong, I mean, there were a lot of Belanta women that I interviewed.
mm-hmm,
um, and I mean, the ritual aspect was there.
right, okay,
I interviewed a woman. Her father was a was more or less like a Nasika,
mm-hmm,
for a village. And so, she, watched her father do all of the protection and everything for their village to keep the Portuguese away.
okay,
So, as a group, they operated within what they needed to do as women. As individuals, of course, it was the choice,
yeah,
of to participate or to not participate.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
No, you
Because
did.
it was a
Yeah, it was two parts to that. So one was just the overall idea that to try and emphasize, and I think this was Cabral's vision of a nation, right? Um, we're a nation of people, not just a collective of different ethnicities, but we're fighting this battle as as a group, as a PIGC. So we are unified under that banner, right? And then the second kind of thing I was thinking about is just what you were speaking to, right? So you have different ethnicities who place a greater or lesser emphasis on ritual and how that impacts um, life and how they move through life, right? So you have maybe like the Fula, who are more Islamic, and they stay away from anything that ritual related. And then you have some of the like Balanta, who are straight, kind of more of an African-centered African spirituality, where ritual is more important. And then you have the different kind of, synchronizations where there's a mix, and so, just wondering how all of that, kind of underlaid, operationally, how they fought, I thought that would be interesting just to kind of hear the different perspectives on, whether or not they engaged in those things, whether it was important, whether it was, not as important as it may have been in other aspects, post or pre-war, like we're putting all that aside. We're just focusing on, operations, strategy, and, and this is how we're going to win this, or whether that was incorporated into, how they went about engaging in the conflict. Yeah. No, so you answered that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's very much important to note, that, with Cabral and the PAIGC, they did not subscribe to, rituals,
Right.
but they knew that the people needed the rituals,
Yeah.
for their own, I guess, mind or
Right.
whatever. And so that was something that I initially asked the questions I asked about rituals because I was trying to find out if, there was someone standing over them saying, no, don't go do that ritual.
Right.
We don't do
Right.
rituals anymore,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And that was never the case,
Okay.
so
Yeah. Interesting, because you hear about when Haiti was in their independence struggle against the French,
yeah.
how important kind of ritual and their spiritual practices were, and a lot of people credit those spiritual practices to them being able to defeat the French. So so yeah, just I thought that was interesting, an interesting aspect.
Yeah.
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 And of course, on the other side of that, well, not on the same side of that, one of the things that, comes to the forefront is that, the ancestors and the spirits of the land, or the spirit of the land, wants the Portuguese to leave. You
Right.
know, they
Right.
they want to expel them,
Yes.
get them
Yes.
out of here. And so that's something that, you see in Angola, um, Mozambique, and that sort of thing when they're when they're fighting the liberation struggle. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, y'all don't belong here at all. So
Right.
the spirits are gonna kick y'all out.
Right. Yeah. 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 The land is going to return
Yeah.
to its rightful owners one way or another,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So just a couple more questions. I know we're running up on an hour here, and I don't want to take too much of your day. So like, final question is, what are the potential implications of your research? What do you hope that this research will eventually lead to? Is it just information? Do you hope to kind of change policy? Do you hope to gather or kind of get more attention to the country of Guinea-Bissau, what's going on there politically? What is the overall lasting impact that you hope that this research will have?
Well, I do hope that at some point, policy will change toward veterans, and that there is attention given to, Guinea-Bissau, because Guinea-Bissau sits very important in the context of African history and actually fighting armed struggle against, the colonial oppressors, because Guinea-Bissau won,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And so when we start looking at South Africa, and we look at other places in Africa that were fighting an armed struggle, Angola and Mozambique. South Africa
Mhm.
didn't fight I mean, they were
Right,
they were pushing,
right.
to to end apartheid. And so Guinea-Bissau situates itself as, when winning this war, as the one to be.
Yeah.
And it was the one that showed the rest of Africa, we can do this.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's very important in that context. So, if you love revolution, if you love, like Africa gaining its independence from the colonial, like if that's something that excites you, then Guinea-Bissau is a place, to look at. And so to
Yeah.
look at these women, not just in Guinea-Bissau, but in other countries in Africa, that contributed to it's very important to give them their flowers,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
when we're talking about veterans, but that's very important. And one of the points that these women did say was that, I don't think that I'm going to be able to benefit from my work, from my sacrifices of war, but I
Hmm.
would like for my children to be taken care of.
Wow.
And so that's one of the things that I would like, to happen from this research, as well. It's just situating Guinea-Bissau where it should sit in African history, and sitting these women that fought liberation wars where they're supposed to go, in
Yeah.
history. And the other thing is that I would like to, also bring light to these women's individual stories. From here, these women, listen, I interviewed a few women for like a little over an hour, 2 hours for one, but most of them for an hour.
Hmm.
These women need memoirs. They need biographies written for them. They need some ghostwriters to get their stories out, because they're I anything that I say will downplay,
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's one of the things that, I would like to see happen, from this, and to more or less Guinea in itself, and the women that are, changing, or that want Guinea-Bissau to move forward, to give them that
Right.
to give them that support that they need, to make the changes that they see fit in their country.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I think you hit on a great point. I think the story of Guinea-Bissau um, needs more spotlight shown upon it. People who are interested and take inspiration from uh, true revolutionary movements. It was one of the only countries in Africa who fought and won their independence. Wasn't granted their independence by the colonial powers just because
know.
they were losing money or it wasn't beneficial for them to stay in power. It was we fought and they won. They drove out the Portuguese and so I think that story in and of itself is inspirational. And and historical and needs to be studied. But further, I mean, just the history of the people in Guinea-Bissau, like the Balanta people and their story of resistance. And so there's a long history, running through the DNA of those people. You saw that during the war, and I think you're still seeing it today. And you see it here, you see it within us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just making that connection from the historical, through the history of the transatlantic slave trade, all the way down through the history of being colonized by the Portuguese, to the fight for independence, and to now what's going on with some of the descendants of Guinea-Bissau, trying to help the country and bring a spotlight. I think that spirit is still there, and I applaud what you're doing, and a lot of the efforts of others who are fighting to bring a spotlight on what's happening in the country, and use that as kind of a launch point, for other things to take place on the continent, specifically in that region. So now just kudos, and it's been a pleasure. So, I'll leave the last word to you. Anything you want to say to the audience, and say to people who will be viewing this video about your research, your travel, your experience, this overall journey that you've been on. Floor is yours.
Well, I want to say thank you for this interview. I'm thankful for your questions and your insight. I've really enjoyed this interview. I can say that, this is all encompassing for me. Doing this research, it's about Guinea-Bissau. It's also about me, too. And it's about reconnecting. And from the Veteran Affairs Department in Guinea-Bissau, they received me so warmly. I mean, the reception there with everyone that has, helped me with a translation, or a song, that sort of thing, has been fantastic. And, what I want to say is, this has been a spiritual thing, and I say spiritual, meaning from me beginning this research to everyone that I've met along the way, how, DNA testing, how we have a whole group, for people that have tested Volanta and tested Fulani. Like, all of this was not in place when I first started.
Right.
And so just like moving all of these moving parts along, getting to Guinea-Bissau, everything was already in place. I was there doing International Women's Day. And there were talks on the book that inspired me to do this research.
Okay.
That was going on there, while I was there at that time, in the same place. And there were, just things coming together, all over the place. There was, I think, a Portuguese film crew. They were doing something on veterans at the time.
Wow.
So it was, nice seeing them, after I finished the interview, they're in the same space. Like,
right.
But I mean, this has been a journey. And what I would say to everyone is that the ancestors want to be known, right? And I mean, that would be one of the reasons why you're here, why you're watching this, is that, it's something about pulling together your story and your purpose that encompasses them as well. And if you can't really see it yet, just keep going.
Okay.
And it will become, living physical manifestation of what you already know, to be true.
Yes.
So just keep going.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
Poco. Little by little.
No, wonderful. Well, thank you so very much for your
Thank
time
you.
this morning.
Thank you.
Some great information. I think our audience will benefit greatly from what you have shared, what you have advised them to do. I think this is going to be great. So thanks once again.
Yes. Thank you.
I've been.
Beanie.
All right.